I'm told I get criticized by the New Left. I have the most progressive record of anybody running for the United, if anybody who would run. I didn't mean. With anybody who would run.
Joe Biden still hasn't come any closer than that to announcing an actual run, but there are new reports that he is already considering a running mate, and this gets real interesting. Axios reported today Biden's advisors are debating Stacey Abrams as an out-of-the-gate VP choice. Abrams, of course, lost her race for Georgia governor. She has said all options are on the table for 2020. According to Axios, quote, the popular Georgia Democrat, who at age 45 is 31 years younger than Biden, would bring diversity and excitement to the ticket, showing voters, in the words of a close source, that Biden isn't just another old white guy. New York Times adds this. Also under discussion is a possible pledge to serve only one term, and framing Mr. Biden's 2020 campaign as a one-time rescue mission for a beleaguered country. So much to discuss, so little time, but at least we have A.B. Stoddard and Anita Kumar with us to do so. So, A.B., desperate, brilliant, or a little bit of both?
It sort of simultaneously looks cocky and panicked and desperate at the same time. It's either a genius trial balloon to sort of tell the primary electorate, I'm acknowledging my potential liabilities, and then he won't do this, or it's really stupid and he really shouldn't do it. There is so much consensus yet to be formed in the Democratic primary electorate. What if he paired up with Stacey Abrams now, and down the road she calls for impeachment, depending on something stumbling out of the Southern District of New York, and he says no? You can't cement this pairing this early. But I think this conversation has told the voters he understands. He could sort of, you have to run as vibrant and strong enough to serve two terms, but you could hint that maybe it'll just be one. You don't, say I'm a lame duck at the start. This could start the conversation that makes them realize he's self-aware and that he wants to shore up those vulnerabilities.
Anita, we're going to put the latest polling on the screen, and I suppose there is a reason for the two guys, both 70-plus years old, that are in the top bracket, both at 26%, and after them, that's a sizable bit of the electorate out there. What do you make of this Biden story, Anita?
Well, I mean, they're on there because of name recognition, right? They've been in the public eye more than some of these other people. But I remember covering Hillary Clinton in the race in 2016, and there was a lot of talk about age, and you had Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump is, not much younger than Joe Biden. I talked to a lot of voters 2 years ago, rather, who said they didn't care, who said age was experience, and they kind of wanted that. And, we saw this remarkable thing that happened in 2016 where an older person got elected. He had no experience at all in government. So I'm just not sure that the age thing matters so much. But it's very interesting that he's kind of fixating on that when others are old, just as old as he is, or almost as old as he is.
A.B., there's a case to be made that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez gets more airtime on Fox News than some of the people employed by Fox News. There's clearly an effort to brand her as the beating heart of the Democratic Party, the talk of socialism, the talk of the far left going forward.
There's no question that President Trump has started his reelection campaign, and he is running against the scary socialists. And the Democrats are giving him way too much of an opportunity, especially those three freshman congresswomen becoming punchlines at Trump rallies. They're all too happy to be those sensations. No one on the Democratic primary campaign trail is pushing back on them. And they're letting them take up all the oxygen. Where's Senator Klobuchar on this? Where's Senator Gillibrand on this? Warren, they don't push back because they're nervous about trying to sort of absorb the energy on the left and being, seen as sort of scary, moderate centrists. If they allow AOC to dictate the terms of the party and sort of become the identity of the party, they're going to be in real trouble next year.
And Anita, I don't know how to say this gently, because the three of us in this conversation, this is not our first rodeo. We know Joe Biden's history, legislative and otherwise. He's been around a long time, and if you have any years on you, you think it's kind of been talked about and examined over the time. A new generation is learning Joe Biden's history, legislative and otherwise, in Washington, things like Anita Hill, the Thomas hearings, and this is all new to them. A lot of them are on the so-called progressive left.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an issue, and it's an issue for everyone who's had a really long history like he has, right? It was an issue even for Hillary Clinton. For people that have these really long histories where society has changed, culture has changed, the Democratic Party's platform has changed, it is something that he's going to have to deal with and answer questions about. And I think that his people are perfectly well aware that that's going to happen, you know, that they're going to have to answer those questions about how things have changed and how he's changed.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.